Moonshine brewing in the night, the stars above her shining bright. Calm and cool she worked alone, mountains watched her set the tone, catching whispers in.
Hey guys, remember all those cherries I got a little while back? Well, those people who gave me the cherries said that I could come onto their property and I could harvest all the apples I want. They have a ton of these apple trees. They're huge apple trees and they're old. They've been around for a long time. No one's been using these apples, so they're just kind of going to waste. The problem with them is that the bear has been climbing these freaking trees and eating the apples. They don't want the bear in their yard. They have a bunch of dogs. So for me, that sounds like a win-win. I come and help them out and I get free apples. We're gonna make some apple brandy. See where I'm going with this? To catch my drift? So come along with me and let's harvest some apples. Dude, just look at these. Do you see this? They're just like falling off the tree. I'm gonna dodge the bear scat and we're gonna get some apples and make some apple brandy. Let's go. A lot of the apples right now are red, except for these apples, which are green. I'm wondering if they're ripe. If you want to know if apples like ripe or if it's just sour, I'm thinking these are just green apples. The best way to do it is to just taste it. If it like dries up your mouth right away, it's probably not ripe yet. These are good. They're a little bit sweet and they're pretty sour. These are just like a sour green baking apple, and that is perfect for apple brandy. The old timers have always told me to use sour green apples for apple brandy. And it makes perfect sense because we sweeten it in with sugar anyway when we make our mash. And through fermentation, we remove the sweetness. And what we're left with is a sour mash. So when you take that sweet sugariness out of an apple, what is left? I mean, the flavor of the apple itself and the tartness, which green apples seem to have a lot more of. However, there's 3 different types of apple varieties on this property, and we're going to take them all. I guess in my mind, all different types of apples have different flavors, and maybe if we combine those all, we'll hit every part of your palate to create something that truly tastes like an apple through the distillation. And remember guys, all of these apples are free, so we're not going to leave any behind. So, there's a lot of apples here, and these are ugly apples. Baking apples or brandy apples. Tastes pretty good to me. I think we're gonna mash them in. Now, I've heard this rumor that ugly apples make good apple brandy. And I always wondered where this comes from, right? So you think back and when they would make apple pies or they sold apples at farms or road stands, they would keep the ugly apples that they didn't want to sell and they would use that at home to make apple pie. So maybe it was thought that these ugly apples were better for pie or they made better tasting apple pie. Therefore, it translated to ugly apples or baking apples would also make a good apple brandy. Maybe it was just the fact that we mashed in those apples that we couldn't sell to make apple brandy with. And therefore, ugly apples were traditionally used for apple brandy. Whether there's any truth to this rumor or not, these ugly apples are coming home with me because they're free and we're going to mash these in. Fun fact, while apple brandy is traditionally made in a copper pot still, it had been known as apple jack for years. Apple jack, or the term jacking, to freeze to make more concentrated, coming from the high-proof liquid heart extracted from a frozen barrel of hard cider, which had been created by accident. But in practice, applejack was a common term for apple brandies across the eastern half of the United States for a long time in the early days. And our intent here is to take these apples and we're going to mash in the whole apple, skin and all. I do like to remove the stems just because they are wood and they could impart a little bit of bitterness. But traditionally, the whole apple was mashed in. They crush up the apple, they let it ferment. We are going to strain the seeds out anyway, so they're not going to hurt us. And I talked a little bit about the seed problem in another video of mine. I need a helmet, guys. I need a helmet for like everyday life. Where people are afraid of the seeds in fruit, saying that they are going to poison us. The seeds in apples are not going to poison us. We're not going to be able to concentrate them enough to be of any harm. And farm distillers and colonial distillers, when they were making apple brandy, they would mash in the whole damn apple, skin, core, seeds and all, believing that every part of that apple contributed to the flavor. So yes, you can make it from just the juice itself. You can cut the apples apart and eliminate the seeds if you want to, but when you increase the scale of your operation, it's easier just to mash in the whole apple. Step 1, collect your apples. Hey, who f***ed my apples? You gotta watch everybody. Can't trust help nowadays. Ugly apples make ugly apple brandy. It don't matter what it looks like, just matters how it tastes. See, practicing's perfect. Now I have it.
You got a long way to go, though.
Let's go get some more apples. Did you know apple brandy was actually America's first original spirit? There were so many apple orchards across the states at the time that Americans just made tons of apple cider and brandy through the 1700s, almost a century before American whiskey was born. Apple brandy, or apple jack, which was made by the freezing distillation of that apple cider, was the foundation of American spirits before Prohibition. Almost a century before American whiskey, which was later created in the 18th century.
So many.
And we're just getting done harvesting all of our apples here. What we're actually going to do is try to make the best apple cider we can. If we follow the tricks of cider makers and winemakers and everything that they utilize to create a really good tasting wine or cider, then we have a really good tasting mash that we can put in the still and hopefully carry over a lot of that apple flavor, exactly like a cider would taste like. The proper yeast usage here is very important to make it taste more like an apple. And I'm about to show you another really good trick on how to start your apple fermentation. Now you'll notice that I have the apples stored in black garbage bags. And I leave these sit for a couple days because what we're actually doing is trapping the ethylene gas that's being released by the fruit, which helps to speed up the ripening process. So if you ever need to ripen a fruit, you stick it in a brown paper bag, you close it up, it traps that gas in there, and it helps it to ripen more quickly. What we're then going to do is take these apples and dump them right into our mash barrel. The idea being that we're going to just let these apples soften up on their own, sort of like that little secret to making banana bread, letting those bananas ripen and turn black. This releases a smell and really helps to intensify that taste and aroma of apple. It also starts the fermentation process for you, so when you go to mash those in, it's a lot easier to crush these apples. That's going to conclude part 1 of harvesting apples. Check out part 2 for the apple brandy mashing, where I include some tips and tricks to make a better tasting apple brandy through fermentation. Thanks again for making it all the way through the end. You guys are awesome. Be good.
Moonshine Amanda running free, whiskey flowing like the sea. Neath the moon's soft silver light, she would brew all through the night.